The house was quiet in a way that only old houses become quiet. Not peaceful, not calm, just heavy, the kind of silence that presses against your chest and reminds you that someone important is missing. She sat alone near the window, her hands folded in her lap, staring at a world that had moved on without her husband. Once this house had been alive. Once it had echoed with confident footsteps, phone calls worth millions, and a man whose name carried weight in boardrooms across the city. Her husband, a self-made man, a man who had built a business empire worth $45 million from nothing but sleepless nights and relentless faith. People feared him, respected him, admired him. But to her, he was just a man who held her hand every night before sleeping and said, "No matter what happens, our family will always be safe." Then one morning, he never woke up. No warning, no goodbye, just a doctor's voice, cold and professional, explaining how life can end between one heartbeat and the next. At that moment, everything collapsed. Her world didn't fall apart loudly. It shattered quietly, because behind the wealth, behind the power, there was a truth no one saw. Their son was still a child, too young to understand balance sheets, too young to understand legacy, too young to understand loss. And so, the weight of a $45 million empire fell onto the shoulders of a grieving woman who didn't even have time to cry. She cried at night, silently, so her son wouldn't hear. During the day, she became someone else. Strong, composed, unbreakable. She walked into boardrooms filled with men who doubted her, men who whispered, "She won't last." But she lasted, not because she loved money, not because she loved power. She lasted because every signature she made, every decision she took, carried one thought: this is not mine. This is my son's future. Years passed. The little boy grew taller, smarter, more confident. He studied business. He learned numbers. He learned how his father had built everything brick by brick. And every time he succeeded, she smiled, quietly, because her entire life had narrowed down to one mission: to hand over everything to her son when the time was right, when he was ready, when he was strong, when he was grateful. What she didn't know was that life was preparing a test she would never see coming. A test not of money, but of loyalty, and it would arrive disguised as love. A few years later, her son got married. The wedding was grand, elegant, expensive. People congratulated her endlessly. "You're so lucky. Your son is settled now. You can finally relax." She smiled and nodded, but deep inside, something felt different. The girl her son married was beautiful, smart, well-spoken. At first, she was respectful. She called her mom. She smiled warmly. But respect can be an act, and smiles can hide intentions. Slowly, the atmosphere of the house began to change. Conversations stopped when she entered the room. Decisions were made without asking her. Her opinions started to sound old-fashioned. She noticed it. She felt it. But she said nothing, because mothers like her don't fight for power. They step back. She believed silence would keep peace. She was wrong, very wrong. At first, the changes were small enough to ignore. A comment here, a suggestion there. Nothing loud, nothing aggressive, just words wrapped in concern. "You work too hard," the daughter-in-law said one evening, her voice soft, almost caring. "You should rest more. Let us handle things." The grandmother smiled politely. Rest sounded nice. Peace sounded even better. So she stepped back a little. She stopped attending some meetings. She let her son sign papers instead. She told herself this was natural. This was how life was supposed to go. A mother raises a son. Then she steps aside and watches him lead. But what she didn't see was what happened behind closed doors. Late at night, when the house was quiet, the daughter-in-law would sit beside her husband, scrolling through numbers on a tablet, shaking her head slowly. "Do you know how much this business could be worth if it was run properly?" she asked. "Your mother is too emotional, too cautious." He would hesitate. "She built this after my father died," he replied. "She sacrificed everything." The daughter-in-law sighed, as if tired of explaining something obvious to a child. "That was years ago," she said. "This is your time now." The words were planted carefully, like seeds, and seeds don't grow overnight. They grow slowly, quietly, until one day, you don't recognize the tree anymore. Soon, respect turned into criticism. Why does she still control everything? Why do you still need her permission? You're a grown man. The son started feeling something unfamiliar. Shame. Shame that he hadn't noticed before. Shame that other men his age were independent. Shame that his mother still had authority. And shame is a dangerous emotion because it doesn't make you stronger. It makes you cruel. The grandmother sensed the distance. Her son spoke less, avoided eye contact, left the room quickly. Once she tried to talk to him. Is everything okay? She asked gently. Yes, Mom, he replied too quickly. Everything's fine. But fine has many meanings. And this one meant broken. The first real wound came during dinner. They were all sitting together when the daughter-in-law laughed lightly and said, You know, Mom, businesses like this don't survive on emotions anymore. They need bold decisions. The grandmother paused. She looked at her son. He didn't say anything. That silence cut deeper than any insult. She nodded slowly. You're right, she said. I may not understand this new world. That night, she locked herself in her room and cried into her pillow. Not because of disrespect, but because she felt herself becoming unnecessary. From that day on, the daughter-in-law grew bolder. She started reviewing files, asking questions, giving instructions to employees. People noticed. Whispers returned to the hallways. This time, not the grandmother. This time, it's the wife. And again, the grandmother said nothing, because every time she looked at her son, she remembered a small boy holding her hand at his father's funeral. She remembered promises. She remembered love. One evening, the daughter-in-law finally said the words she had been building toward. What's the point of keeping all this? She asked casually. We could sell the business. The room froze. The son looked up sharply. Sell it, he repeated. Yes, she said. It's old-fashioned. The market is risky. We could invest elsewhere, start fresh. The grandmother felt her heart stop. Sell it. This wasn't just a business. This was her husband's life, her sacrifice, her sleepless nights. She waited for her son to react, to refuse, to defend, but instead he stayed quiet. And silence once again spoke for him. Later that night, the son stood outside his mother's room, hand raised to knock. He hesitated. Inside, the grandmother was sitting on her bed, holding an old photograph. Her husband, smiling proudly, a younger version of herself, and their little boy between them. She whispered to the picture, I protected this for him. Tears rolled down her face. She didn't know yet that the hardest part of her life wasn't building the empire alone. It was watching the person she built it for slowly turn away. The next few weeks felt heavier than the years before them. The daughter-in-law stopped pretending. Her tone sharpened. Her patience vanished. She began speaking openly, without lowering her voice, without waiting for the grandmother to leave the room. This business is stuck in the past, she said one afternoon while going through files at the dining table. Anyone with sense would cash out. The grandmother stood near the doorway, listening. Once, those words would have been followed by an apology. Now they weren't. The son sat beside his wife, eyes fixed on the papers, silent. That silence was becoming a habit. At night, the conversations grew harsher. You're letting her control you, the daughter-in-law said. Men your age don't live like this. She's my mother, he replied weakly. And I'm your wife, she shot back. If you don't choose now, you'll lose me. The threat hung in the air. Choose between love and duty, between the past and the present, between the woman who gave him life and the woman who shared his bed. Fear made the decision easier than conscience. The son began to change. He grew impatient with his mother, corrected her in front of staff, signed documents without discussing them. Each small act chipped away at her dignity. Still, she said nothing, because she believed patience would be rewarded, because she believed her son would remember who she was. One evening, the confrontation finally came. He sat across from her, hands clasped, eyes avoiding hers. Mom, he said, clearing his throat. We need to talk. She smiled gently. Of course, she said. I'm listening. The daughter-in-law stood behind him, arms crossed. He took a deep breath. I think it's time you transferred the business to me. The words fell hard. The grandmother felt her body go numb. She searched his face. For doubt, for guilt, for love. She found none. And after that, the daughter-in-law added calmly, we should sell it. Something broke inside the grandmother. Not loudly, just a quiet collapse. She didn't shout. She didn't argue. She simply asked one question. Is this what you want? The son hesitated, just for a second. Then he nodded. Yes. That single word erased decades of sacrifice. She stood up slowly. Her legs trembled, but her voice didn't. If this will make you happy, she said, then I won't stand in your way. The daughter-in-law smiled. The son looked relieved. Neither noticed the way her hands shook. The next morning, legal papers were prepared. Transfer of ownership, signatures, witnesses. The grandmother held the pen. That pen felt heavier than any burden she had ever carried. With every stroke of her signature, memories flooded back. Her husband's laughter, late nights, her son's childhood. She signed anyway, because that's what mothers do. They bleed silently. The business was sold within months. $45 million transferred. Celebrations followed. New cars, foreign trips, a new house, and in the middle of it all, the grandmother sat quietly in a small room at the back of the house. No one asked her how she felt. No one noticed she had stopped eating properly, or that she spoke to herself more often. One night, she took off her wedding ring. She placed it on the table and whispered, I kept my promise. Tears fell onto the cold surface. She didn't know this was only the beginning of her loneliness, because money can buy happiness for some, but it always demands a price, and hers was about to be collected. The money changed everything. Almost overnight, the house that once felt like a home turned into a showroom of luxury. New furniture replaced the old. Paintings were taken down and replaced with abstract art that meant nothing to her. The walls looked richer, but the rooms felt emptier. The son and his wife were busy living their dream. Morning breakfasts were replaced by rushed coffee. Conversations were replaced by phone calls. Laughter was replaced by plans. Trips were booked. Cars were upgraded. Parties became routine. And in the middle of it all, the grandmother became invisible. She moved quietly through the house, careful not to disturb anyone. She ate alone. She slept early. She woke up before dawn just to feel useful again. Sometimes she would sit in the garden, watching the sun rise, whispering her husband's name. She spoke to him more now than she had when he was alive. The son noticed the changes. At least, he told himself he did. He saw his mother growing thinner, quieter, smaller, but every time guilt tried to surface, his wife distracted him. This is what success looks like, she said. You're just not used to it yet. So he pushed the guilt away, because guilt is inconvenient when you're enjoying comfort. The grandmother stopped going out. She stopped visiting old friends. She stopped attending family gatherings. People asked about her. She's resting, the daughter-in-law replied with a smile. She deserves it. But rest wasn't what she was getting. She was fading. One afternoon, while everyone was out, the grandmother opened an old cupboard. Inside were things no one cared about anymore. Her husband's watch, old business files with handwritten notes, photographs that smelled like time. She held the watch in her hand. It wasn't worth much now, but it had built an empire. She pressed it against her chest and closed her eyes. For a moment, she felt less alone. The money didn't last the way they expected. Bad investments, fast spending, wrong advice. Losses began quietly, the way success once had. The daughter-in-law grew restless. This wasn't the life she had imagined. The son worked longer hours, chasing what was slipping away. Neither noticed the empty chair at the dining table anymore. One night, the grandmother fainted in her room. No one heard the fall. She woke up on the floor hours later, cold and confused. She struggled to stand, leaning against the wall. Her body was giving up, but she didn't call for help because she didn't want to be a burden. When the son finally found out, days later, he panicked. He rushed to her room. "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" he asked. She smiled weakly. "You looked busy," she replied. "I didn't want to disturb you." Those words cut through him. But again, the moment passed. Life demanded attention. Money demanded attention. And the grandmother was pushed back into silence. That night, she wrote something in a small notebook. Just a few lines. No anger, no blame, only truth. She closed the notebook and placed it beside her bed. Outside, the city lights glittered. Inside, an old woman prepared herself for a loneliness deeper than any she had known. The losses could no longer be hidden. Bank statements started arriving with red numbers. Calls from advisors became tense. Promises of quick recovery turned into excuses. The daughter-in-law stopped smiling. Her voice, once sweet and confident, became sharp and impatient. "This isn't what I signed up for," she said one evening, throwing her phone onto the table. "You said selling the business would make us unstoppable." The son rubbed his temples. "We still have money," he replied. "We just need to be careful." Careful. The word sounded like failure to her. Arguments became common. Small things turned into big fights. Silence between them grew heavy and hostile. And as their relationship cracked, the grandmother watched from a distance. She didn't interfere. She didn't advise, because no one asked her anymore. The daughter-in-law started coming home late, sometimes not at all. She stopped informing anyone of her plans, stopped pretending to care. The son noticed. Fear replaced confidence. One night, the daughter-in-law finally said what had been building inside her. "I can't live like this," she said coldly. "This house feels suffocating." He looked at her in shock. "This is our home," he said. She laughed bitterly. "No," she replied. "It was your mother's home, and now it's just a reminder of mistakes." The words echoed through the room. The grandmother heard everything from her bedroom. She sat on her bed, hands clenched, listening. For the first time, she felt anger. Not at the daughter-in-law, at herself, for trusting silence. The next morning, the daughter-in-law didn't come back. No note, no explanation, just an empty wardrobe and unanswered calls. The son stood in the middle of the room, staring at her absence. Reality finally caught up with him. Days passed. Money kept draining. Respect disappeared. Friends stopped calling. Invitations stopped coming. And the son, once confident and admired, began to shrink. One afternoon, he found his mother sitting in the garden, staring at nothing. "Mom," he said softly, "I think I made a mistake." She didn't respond immediately. Then she turned to him. "We all do," she said quietly. That was it. No lecture, no blame, just acceptance. And somehow, that hurt him more than anger ever could. That night, he sat alone in his room, surrounded by expensive things that now felt meaningless. He thought of his father, of the empire that once existed, of the choices he had made. And for the first time, he felt real regret. Not because he lost money, but because he lost trust. In her room, the grandmother opened her notebook again. She added one more line. "I hope he learns before it's too late." Her hand trembled as she closed it. She didn't know time was already running out. The house felt hollow after she left. Not quiet, hollow, as if something had been torn out of it and never replaced. The son walked through the rooms aimlessly, touching things that no longer mattered. Luxury furniture, decorations chosen by someone who was gone. Every corner reminded him of how quickly everything had fallen apart. He tried to fix things. He called investors, met advisors, chased opportunities that no longer trusted him. Doors that once opened easily now stayed shut. The name that once carried weight felt empty, without the foundation his father had built. Late one night, he found himself sitting in his mother's room. He hadn't been there in months. The room was simple, almost untouched by wealth. Old curtains, a small lamp, a bed that creaked when he sat down. It felt real. He noticed her breathing had changed. Shallow, uneven. Fear tightened his chest. "Mom," he whispered. "Are you okay?" She opened her eyes slowly and smiled. "I'm fine," she said. "Sit." He sat beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he broke. "I ruined everything," he said, his voice cracking. "I listened to the wrong person." Tears filled his eyes. She reached out and placed her hand over his. Her hand was cold. "We all get lost sometimes," she said gently. "What matters is whether we find our way back." He looked around the room. "This was Dad's," he said, pointing to an old notebook on the shelf. "Yes," she replied. "He used to write his thoughts there." The son opened it. Inside were handwritten notes about patience, integrity, and responsibility. He closed the book quickly. Shame burned in his chest. Days later, the doctor came. Tests were done. Voices were hushed. The son waited outside, heart racing. When the doctor finally spoke, his expression said enough. "She's very weak," he said, "emotionally and physically." The words felt like punishment. The son stayed home more, canceled meetings, ignored calls. He started cooking for his mother, sitting with her, talking about childhood, about his father, about regrets. For the first time in years, they were together again. But time doesn't pause for regret. One evening, she looked at him for a long time. "You know," she said softly, "I never wanted anything from you, just respect." He lowered his head. "I'm sorry," he whispered. She smiled. "I know," she replied. And that forgiveness felt heavier than any anger. That night, she didn't eat. She barely slept. The son sat beside her bed, holding her hand, afraid to let go. Some apologies come too late, and some realizations arrive only when there's nothing left to save. The doctor returned the next morning. This time, he didn't sit down. That was how the son knew. "She needs constant care," the doctor said carefully. "And you should be prepared, emotionally." Prepared. The word echoed in the son's mind long after the doctor had left. He sat beside his mother, watching her sleep. Every breath felt borrowed. The house adjusted around her illness. Curtains stayed open for sunlight. Noise disappeared. Time slowed. The son barely slept. He watched the woman who had once carried an empire now struggle to lift a glass of water. Guilt became his shadow. One afternoon, she asked him to bring her the small notebook, the same one she always kept close. He handed it to her. She flipped through the pages slowly, as if revisiting her life. Then she stopped and wrote something. Her hand shook, but her words were steady. "Promise me something," she said quietly. "Anything," he replied instantly. "Don't measure people by what they can give you," she said. "Measure them by what they're willing to lose for you." His throat tightened. He nodded. She grew weaker with each passing hour. Sometimes she mistook him for his father. She would smile and whisper, "You're late." The son didn't correct her. He let her believe. That night, the power went out briefly. The room fell into darkness. The son held her hand tighter, afraid she would disappear with a light. She squeezed back weakly. "I'm not afraid," she said softly. "I lived for you." Tears streamed down his face. In the early hours before dawn, she woke suddenly. She looked at him clearly, fully present. "This is goodbye," she said. "No," he whispered. "Please don't." She smiled. "I forgive you," she said. "Don't carry this forever." Her eyes closed slowly. Her hand went still. And in that silence, the son lost more than a mother. He lost the last chance to make things right. He sat there for a long time, not crying, not moving, just holding her hand. When the sun rose, it found a man broken beyond repair. The house was silent again. This time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was empty. Friends, relatives, even neighbors came and went, offering condolences. Flowers arrived in dozens of arrangements, but none could fill the void. The empire she once protected now seemed meaningless against the emptiness left behind. During the funeral, the son noticed faces he had never really seen before. People murmuring, smiling politely, and leaving as if life had gone on without them. It struck him how fleeting respect had been, how fragile loyalty really was. He looked around for the daughter-in-law. She stayed away. Too busy, she claimed. Too important, she implied. The son realized then that wealth had not only stolen time from his mother, it had also revealed the true colors of those around him. After everyone left, he returned to her room. The small notebook lay untouched on the bedside table. He opened it carefully, expecting memories, guidance, something. Inside, a folded piece of paper slipped out. His mother's handwriting, clear despite age. "My son, if you're reading this, I am gone. I hope you remember that wealth is never the measure of love. Respect is earned, not given. And no one can take what is truly yours, your heart, your integrity, your memories of those who stood by you when no one else did. Live with honesty and remember me with kindness, not regret." The son sank to his knees, clutching the letter. Tears streamed down his face. He could feel every word like a burn on his chest. Regret, shame, and love all collided inside him. He thought about all the moments he had ignored her, all the subtle manipulations he had allowed, all the nights she spent awake, carrying the weight of a world she had built for him. He felt small, hopeless, alone. Days passed. The business, once sold, began to crumble. Investments went bad. Advisors disappeared. The wealth that had promised freedom now felt like chains. And in every empty room, he felt her absence. Her quiet presence that had once guided the house. Her eyes, full of wisdom, now only alive in memory. One night he walked through the house alone. The echo of his own footsteps felt unnatural. He found her favorite chair by the window, still in its old place. He sat down and whispered, "Mom, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." No reply came, only the distant sound of wind brushing the curtains. And yet, in that silence, he felt the weight of her forgiveness and the lifelong pain of his own mistakes. The son realized something profound. Money could vanish, power could fade, but a mother's love, once given, leaves an imprint that lasts forever. And a mother's absence teaches lessons far sharper than wealth ever could. The days turned into weeks, but the emptiness never left him. The son moved through the house mechanically, performing the routines of life without feeling them. Meetings, calls, emails, they all blurred into one endless gray haze. The empire that had once been a symbol of power now felt like a tomb. Late one night, the daughter-in-law returned. She opened the door quietly, expecting the same warmth she had left behind years ago. Instead, she found cold walls, an empty dining table, and a man transformed by loss. He didn't greet her. He didn't argue. He simply stared. For the first time, she saw the consequences of her choices. The empire she had once wanted to control was crumbling, and the son, once naive and obedient, now carried the weight of guilt and loss like armor. She spoke, voice trembling slightly. I didn't realize." He cut her off. "Realize what?" he asked quietly. "That wealth doesn't fix everything. That lies and manipulation destroy what truly matters." Her eyes filled with tears. The power she had wielded so easily before now felt meaningless. She had taken the easy path, and the cost was visible in the hollow eyes of the man before her. He spent hours walking through the house, reliving memories of his mother, her quiet guidance, her sacrifices, her patience. Each memory hit harder than the last. And in that solitude, he began to change. No longer driven by wealth, no longer swayed by convenience, no longer willing to ignore what truly mattered. He started small, restoring her favorite chair, cooking simple meals she had loved, organizing the photos she had cherished. Every act felt like a tribute. Every act felt like an apology. And slowly, the house started feeling like a home again, though she wasn't there to see it. One evening, he opened her notebook again. This time, he read every page carefully, absorbing her words like a blueprint for life. Measure people by what they're willing to lose for you. Live with integrity, even when no one is watching. Love is patience, respect is silent, wealth is fragile. Her voice seemed to echo in the room, teaching him lessons he had once ignored. He finally understood the depth of her forgiveness. It wasn't loud. It wasn't demanding. It wasn't conditional. It was quiet, enduring, and it was far stronger than any wealth he had inherited. That night he sat by the window for hours, staring at the stars. He thought of his mother's life, her sacrifices, and her love. And for the first time, he felt a sense of purpose. He vowed that her legacy wouldn't be wasted. Not through greed, not through ignorance, not through silence. Morning sunlight spilled through the windows, catching dust particles that danced like memories in the air. The son, once lost in regret, was no longer the same man who had allowed greed and manipulation to cloud his judgment. He began small, reviewing the remnants of the business, assessing what could be salvaged, planning carefully, methodically. No shortcuts, no flashy moves, no reckless decisions. The daughter-in-law, still shaken by the emptiness she had caused, stayed mostly silent. She watched as he worked tirelessly, not for luxury, not for power, but to honor the memory of a woman who had given everything for him. And slowly, she began to understand the depth of her mistakes. At night, he would sit in his mother's favorite chair, opening the notebook she had left behind. He read her words again and again, letting them guide his choices. Measure people by what they're willing to lose for you. Live with integrity, even when no one is watching. Her lessons became his compass, Her voice became his conscience. Months passed. The business, once sold and nearly lost, started regaining stability. Every small victory reminded him of her sacrifice. Every cautious move reflected the wisdom she had instilled in him over the years. He began hiring carefully, listening more than speaking, treating employees with respect rather than authority. The empire she had built was slowly returning, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a testament to values. The daughter-in-law, witnessing his transformation, approached him one evening. I see now," she said softly. "You've changed, and I understand how much she truly gave for you." He looked at her, eyes still heavy with memory and loss. "I can only try to honor her," he replied. "She trusted me to carry forward what mattered most." Evenings were spent in quiet reflection. He walked through the rooms of the house alone, arranging small things she had loved. The vase by the window, the old photographs, the small chair by the garden. Every corner reminded him of her presence. Every act felt like a conversation with her. And sometimes, when the night was still and the world quiet, he could almost hear her voice. "I lived for you, I trusted you. Do not waste what is truly valuable." Her words, though gone, guided him more than anyone else ever could. The son had changed, not just in action, but in spirit. He had learned what wealth could never teach: the strength of patience, the power of integrity, and the enduring force of a mother's love. The daughter-in-law's confidence began to crumble. The luxurious life she had sought so eagerly was slipping from her fingers. The investments she had pushed for failed. The shortcuts she had taken offered no solution. The empire, now guided by the son's respect for his mother's principles, could no longer be manipulated by her whims. She realized too late that the woman she had underestimated, the quiet, patient grandmother, had left behind more than wealth. She had left a blueprint of resilience, integrity, and foresight, and the son, shaped by loss and regret, was following it meticulously. One evening she confronted him, her voice trembling. I never realized." He stopped her with a calm but firm gaze. "You never realize that wealth is temporary," he said. "You never realize that respect, loyalty, and patience are what really build an empire." Her silence spoke louder than any apology. Meanwhile, he continued restoring the business. Employees returned. Operations stabilized. The brand, once nearly lost, began regaining its reputation. The empire his mother had built was alive again, not through force, but through values she had instilled in her son. Late at night, he sat alone in her room, surrounded by the small treasures she had cherished: the notebook, photographs, her wedding ring, and her favorite chair. He read her last letter again. "My son, if you're reading this, I am gone. I hope you remember that wealth is never the measure of love. Respect is earned, not given. And no one can take what is truly yours: your heart, your integrity, your memories of those who stood by you when no one else did. Live with honesty and remember me with kindness, not regret." He whispered to the empty room. "I understand now, Mom. I will not waste this." For the first time in years, he felt peace. Not the shallow peace of comfort or wealth, but the deep peace of knowing he had honored her sacrifice. The daughter-in-law, now marginalized and regretful, left the house quietly, understanding that her actions had consequences she could not reverse. The son stayed, tending the house and the business with care, keeping his mother's memory alive in every decision, every action, and every moment. Her legacy, her values, her strength, her silent love lived on in him. And in that home once hollow, warmth returned. Not from money, not from power, but from the lessons of a woman who had built an empire, and a man who finally learned how to carry it forward. Years passed, but the lessons she had left remained. The son had transformed completely. The man who once allowed manipulation and greed to guide his life now led with integrity and patience. He had rebuilt the business, not just for profit, but as a testament to the values his mother had lived and died for. Every morning, he walked through the rooms of the house she had loved. Every photograph, every small object reminded him of her strength. And in those quiet moments, he could almost hear her whisper, "Measure people by what they're willing to lose for you." He carried that principle in every decision, in every negotiation. In every interaction, the daughter-in-law was gone. The life she had envisioned had crumbled, and he felt neither joy nor satisfaction in her failure, only a solemn reminder of the choices she had made. Regret, he realized, was a teacher far stronger than wealth, and forgiveness, when truly given, carried a power beyond money. He often returned to the notebook she had left behind. The pages, worn and filled with her handwriting, were now a guidebook for life. Every lesson, every word of wisdom, reminded him that the greatest legacy was not money, but character, patience, and love. At night, he would sit by the window, looking at the stars. He would speak to her silently, telling her about the small victories, the challenges overcome, and the life he was building in her honor. And in those moments, he felt her presence, a comforting warmth that reminded him that she had never truly left. The empire she had built was thriving again, but this time, it was not just a collection of wealth. It was a reflection of her values, her patience, and her love. Her silent lessons had shaped him into the man she had always hoped he would become. He finally understood the depth of her sacrifices. He finally realized that the greatest treasures were not the dollars she had built, but the strength, wisdom, and love she had instilled in him. And in that understanding, he found peace. Not fleeting peace, but the enduring peace of knowing that some legacies never die. Some lives, some love, and some lessons echo through generations, reminding us that the true measure of life is not wealth, but integrity, patience, and the silent power of a mother's love.